this is the in-depth bass fishing video, pre-spawn bass, where they've been, where they're going, and where they are right now. And you know, you can't really become a good fisherman unless you know what they're doing. And truthfully, if you know how to bass fish, you can figure out the rest of them. So if you learn how to bass fish, you can figure out crappie fishing. Figure out bass fishing, you can figure out bluegill, because it all relates to one another. So the bass are following the bluegill, and the bluegill are following other things. So and you know that, you know where the shad are in the lake. So know the habits of a bass and what they're doing each month out of the year, and that's going to get you a long way to become a better fisherman. And so what we're going to try and do, what we've been doing last month and this month, is teach you where they're supposed to be. They're not always going to be exactly where we want them to be. It's water temperature dependent, but on average, year in, year out, we're going to try and teach you where they should be this time of the year, and where they've been, where they're going, and where they are right now. Isn't that right, Jason Holland?
Yeah, we have to figure out, because you got Jason Holland and Jason Harmon, so we'll just have to make some assumptions. But yeah, I mean, what I love of what you said is because it's true, is that everything makes a circle in regards to the overall food chain. And again, springtime or spawn time, you know, you're looking for certain things. For instance, bass fishing, you're looking for bluegill beds, knowing at post-spawn, the bass are going to be looking to feed up and bluegill are going to be spawning at that specific time. When you look at crappie fishing, a lot of times crappie are going to suspend above, treetops or in brush, which is a great place to go and find bass, which will be typically hanging below the crappie. So yeah, everything makes a circle of the way that works. And then when you look at seasons, when you look at water temp, and when you look at specific types of reservoirs, there's going to be a pattern that happens every single year. Now that pattern will be a little bit different from a timing perspective, just depending on what the water is, that's the water, but the temperature is doing to the water. And then a lot of times these patterns will overlap each other. Your wintertime pattern will overlap your springtime pattern. Spring will overlap summer, and you guys get the idea. So really what we're going to be doing and talking about today is what Mike said, where they're at, where they're going to, what route are they going to take to get there, and ultimately how to help you as the bass fisherman or fisherman in general. How do you head off those fish as they make these transitions in and out of different places of the lake?
I guess what we need to start off with first is in the winter, like last month we were talking about where they are in the winter. What they try and seek out in the winter are deep holes, sheer bluffs, and steep 45-degree banks and drops. So a couple of examples of that. Say if you're on Center Hill Lake, there it is loaded with bluff, and so any of those bluffs in the dead of the winter, that's what you're looking for. You know, sharp breaks in the dead of the winter, even if it's up next to a flat. So let me see if I can share my screen here, and I'll show you what I'm talking about.
And Mike, while you're getting that ready, let me explain real quick why that's important to understand, especially wintertime when you're looking at these sharp breaks, these bluff ends. You got to think about it. So right now we're obviously experiencing across most of the Midwest and Middle Tennessee and West, this massive cold front. And so when you think about a bluff, obviously you've got a sharp, just straight drop, typically with a little bit of shelf, and then you've got down to deeper water. So what it does is, depending on what the weather is, it allows that bass to come up or come down based on barometric pressure, based on the weather, based on water temp. and even in current on those shelves, it allows them to have a current break. And so if you think about a bass, he wants to move as little as he possibly can to eat and just to have his overall life sustainable. Again, they are cold water creatures, and so whatever that temperature is, that's what his body's going to be. And so just like the rest of us, the colder we are, the slower we move, the stiffer we are. And as we get warmer, that makes that change. So when you think about dead of winter, that fish is going to go up and down, the ones that are on the bluffs, depending on whatever is going to be the most comfortable for him with very little energy. All he has to do is just float up or float down. And so that's why bluffs are really important this time of year, just because that's where it's going to congregate a large amount of bass. And again, Mike will talk a little bit about some of the other stuff, but that's just some knowledge to understand why a fish will get on a bluff or a bass in the wintertime, and why does he stay there.
Are you seeing this, Jason?
We are.
All right. So this is Dale Hollow Lake. This is one of the better places to fish on this entire lake, and it's not a secret. I'm not letting anybody in on secrets, but this is one of the major flats on this entire lake. And so you get up on top of this, and it appears to be fairly shallow, and it's really not near as deep as it's reading here. You can get up on this flat, and it's full of grass. So if you have grass in your lake, even in the winter, those fish are going to try and relate to the grass. So this is an entire flat just full of grass. So they've been in these holes. You see these holes 70 foot deep. This is 100 foot of water. They don't like to get in the current, but they'll stage out in this very, very deep water. And where they're going is up here. This entire flat is a spawning flat. This whole thing. Okay, you hear about make your way to the backs of the creeks, in the spring, that's where the fish are going to spawn. That's true too. But those fish can spawn, all of them can spawn right out here. The same thing is true for Center Hill Lake. Hurricane boat ramp and Hurricane boat dock. There is a campground around the corner. It's full of a swim area and sand. Those smallmouth spawn on that entire flat. Before they brought the water back up, they had to put buoys out in front of that. It's the same kind of flat, and that's where these fish love to spawn. And so they don't have to go all the way to the back of the creek. They can just pop up off of this drop and come all the way up here. So they're here right now. They're off these big drops. And when they get hungry, or when they can gather up some shad or whatever, they can push them up on this flat. It makes it easier for them. Plus, there's not a great deal of current out here on Dale Hollow Lake or Center Hill, really. So they don't have to worry about fighting current. Now, this is different than Kentucky Lake. It's different than Old Hickory and Barkley and Pickwick. So you got to treat these lakes differently because they are different. This is the Highland Reservoir, Center Hill, Dale Hollow, Tellico, lakes with big mountains, big drops, full of rock. We've got a question in here. Where do bass spawn in Center Hill Lake? Because it's all rock. Well, Center Hill Lake, Dale Hollow, they get on these big drops. If you know Center Hill Lake, like I said, there's a big flat right there in front of Hurricane. I know they spawn there. They spawn on they don't have to go all the way to the back of the creek. They can, but they don't have to. So they'll spawn in the backs of the creeks. They'll spawn on these flats. Even on these Highland Reservoir lakes, I've seen them spawning on bluff walls, ledges of bluff walls. And I get on there, and you can look down and see them spawning on the ledges. So you don't have to always think back of creeks. Just think of out of the current, sandy, substrate. Try and get some sand or pea gravel. That's why Dale Hollow and Center Hill are great. Tim's Ford, great for smallmouth because you've got a sandy pea gravel bank. They love to spawn on that stuff. If you're looking at big chunk rock, they're probably not spawning on that. What you want to do is try and find in the transition between winter and spring, you want to find something where you've got this big difference between the very large drop and a sharp flat, or you're trying to look for chunk rock boulder and pea gravel that are together. And those fish will gang up right in that seam. So that's what you look for. Jason?
So I'll add a couple things to that. So really, as we first talked about, all right, where have they been? Of course, we've talked about them on bluffs, drops, the big holes, the deeper water. And as we start this transition period, typically it revolves around water temp, a little bit of moon phase, but mostly water temp. And as it starts to warm up, bass start to Mother Nature starts to kick in, their DNA starts to kick in, and they're looking toward spawning. And so they're going to be making these transitions from where they are wintering at to you kind of get, it's called the pre-spawn. They're pre-spawn areas, and they're going to move on to the spawn. So talking about the pre-spawn process, you got to think, to Mike's point, depending on what type of lake that you're at, will depend on really what that migration period is going to look like. So if most of us that fish, we hunt as well, and it's a lot of the same process. If you think about it mentally, what these bass are doing, they're going from where they're wintering, they're going to move to where they're going to spawn, and then from there they're going to transition out. And in between that process, they're going to use a highway. If you're deer hunting, they're going to use tree lines, they're going to use ridges and different things. Well, bass is going to do the exact same thing. They're going to have a transition path that they're going to take from where they were at to where they're going. And right now we're in that, we're kind of in, right now it doesn't really feel like it, but we're kind of in late winter, coming out of it. And we're going to be moving into that March time frame. And depending on where you're at in the state of Tennessee, that's really when things start kicking up for the pre-spawn. Typically, again, none of this is a hard fact rule. If it was, it'd be much easier for all of us. We know exactly this date they're going to be here, and we would transition to that. But it's not. We're dealing with a live living thing that has a lot of different aspects to why they do what they do, which makes it fun. That's the whole point of why we do it, is to chase and that's that overall hunting process. But so what Mike was saying is, if you take Center Hill, Dale Hollow, typically those are clear water. Highland reservoirs are typically clear water, very little to no current, much different than, say, an Old Hickory or a Kentucky Lake, which has a overall, it's a power generation lake and has a river system flowing through it. So what happens, especially with smallmouth, they are going to spawn in typically deeper water because it is typically more clear. And so exactly what Mike said is exactly what they want. They want the stable as much as they possibly can get, water temp. They want it stable from storms. And so they're looking for ways that they can, just like any mother would do, protect their children the best that they possibly can and put them in an environment that they have the most opportunity for success to live and to grow. That's exactly what a bass does. And so when you're thinking Dale Hollow, Tim's Ford, Center Hill, yes, the largemouth, some will move to the back of creeks, but and some of the smallmouth will as well. They don't all spawn in the exact same spots and the exact same lake. But typically in a clear highland reservoir, they're going to spawn a little bit deeper. And so really why that is important, and it's really what we're going to dive into right now, is that highway of where they're going to spawn. So a highway for a smallmouth bass on Center Hill is going to be different than a largemouth bass on what we're looking right here on Old Hickory. And so we're going to kind of talk about that transition or that path that these fish are going to take. And that's really where we're at right now, or about to be into, is the pre-spawn time of the year.
All right. So this is Old Hickory Lake. This lake is, if you took and geez. All right. Pickwick, Kentucky Lake, Barkley, Watts Bar, Chickamauga, Gunnersville. Of course, Chickamauga and Gunnersville are absolutely not Old Hickory, but same type of lake. They're both riverine type of lakes. This is the river. This is Cumberland River, and it flows through Old Hickory, and it absolutely has current. This is Station Camp Creek. This is Spencer. Two different creeks, and you got to treat them two different ways. This is a clear water creek. This creek right here is a muddy water creek. Fish spawn in both areas. They will overwinter in both areas. You got to remember that Old Hickory, deepest spot on Old Hickory is probably not 6 feet deep, right, Jason?
I'd say so.
Yeah, and
At best.
So some of your fish are going to winter out here, and they're going to find a current break on the river. And so this is the river ledge. You can fish this in the summer, fish ledges. And some fish will overwinter here, and then some will overwinter inside of the creek itself. So they'll winter off these large drops inside the creek. Either way, most of the fish in this entire lake are going to make their way down this highway. This is their path. They're not going to jump up on this flat. You got to remember, when they jump up on this flat during the transition, they put themselves at risk, because you guys know that in the spring we'll get waves of weather. So, we can get snow in March, and they're not going to be caught dead up here when the water hits 30 degrees. So they're going to stay in this highway so they can go up, and they'll come down based upon water temperature, and they're trying to make their way back to where they want to spawn. In Old Hickory and Station Camp, some of them spawn right here. This is a major grass bed on Old Hickory Lake. Really, all these little dots right in here, they'll spawn right there. All Old Hickory fish, they love to spawn in dead grass. So some of the bigger fish of the year I know are flipped out of that dead grass each and every year. So they're making their way back in this creek, and some will stop here. And if they don't stop there, they keep traveling along, especially on this side. They'll follow this deep channel side until they find somewhere they want to spawn. Next stop they would spawn would be these pockets right here. And then from there, they kind of disperse out. Some come over here in the very, very back of this ski cove. And some come all the way back here in the back end of Station Camp. Some of the best weights in the tournaments come out right behind this bridge where it is a foot deep. And some people can sit out here and pick these fish off when they're trying to go up under this bridge. So what you got to remember is these fish, like Jason said, are traveling these highways. No matter where on this lake you go, you're wanting to find fish in the transition in March close to this channel. Okay, and as closer you get to April, the more likely it is that they're going to be closer to the back end of these pockets, or closer to coming up on these flats. So April 15th, you can bet the fish are going to be spawning. Okay, early April, you can bet smallmouth are going to be spawning. So April 15th, largemouth on average. Early April, smallmouth are going to be spawning. So smallmouth spawn around 62 degrees, largemouth around 65, and that can be about a week and a half, 2 week difference. And sometimes it's at the same time, but it'll be a little different.
Hey, Mike, before we jump off that, can you zoom in real quick? I'm just going to take us a couple minutes real fast. for maybe some folks that are on here and watching what we're looking at here. By the way, this is a free service. This is through Navionics. Navionics is a chip manufacturer that gives all these contour lines. It marks buoys and a lot of different things. And you can go out and buy chips for your chart plotters and things for your boat. But this is a free web app. Mike, if you can just zoom in just a little bit, right there is fine, right there in the middle at that channel swing and station camp. There we go. That's perfect. Yeah.
All right.
And so really just take a couple of minutes. What you look at and see is with the contour lines, since these dark lines are on your screen, there's just contour lines of what the bottom of the lake looks like. And when you got these really tight lines together, as you can see right here in the middle, it kind of makes this Y. As you look at these contour lines, what that is telling you is that that is a deeper drop. And we're not going to go through a topographical seminar tonight, but as you're looking at maps online, paper maps, however you're looking at them, the contour lines, as it gets deeper, as it has a sharper break, the contour lines will get much tighter. And that's, as you can see with this, what we're looking at right here in this Y, you can clearly see the creek channel. Now, what a creek channel is, I heard that term a lot when I first started fishing, and I had no idea really what it meant. All that means is before all this was flooded, right? Before they put the dam in and they flooded this bottom area, there was some creeks that ran through there. And that's what you're looking at here is the creeks that was there before the lake was formed. And so obviously it's going to be a deeper area and also going to have some sharp breaks. You just imagine in your head an old creek that was there, and that will help you begin to understand and process what we're talking about. But if you look over here on the about middle right, it says that parking lot, as you see a little sign over there. If you look just to the left of that, you'll see those really blacked out contour lines. And that's actually a great way to know where a bluff is at if you're looking at a map. That is an indication of a bluff. And they're going to be here and stay here, and then they're going to start making their way back to the left, going back into areas to spawn. Something that's really important is they're not all going to move at one time. They're all not going to spawn at the exact same time, and they're all not going to take the exact same route. So all I'm saying, and with that, is make sure that you don't get dialed into just one specific area or one specific pattern or one specific type of spot, because that can that'll pigeonhole your fishing, because again, they're not all going to move on the exact same time and the exact same route. But what we're telling you are really good indicators, or they're really good places to start your process of finding these fish. And remember, they're going to keep transitioning back, trying to get ready to spawn here coming up.
So to that point, if you're doing map study at home before you go out and say you've never been to Old Hickory Lake, and that's probably the better way to go about it. Instead of, if you want to start catching fish, stop going out and being like my dad when I was growing up. We always went to the same creek on Center Hill. We always fished Indian Creek, and lo and behold, we always fished the very last pocket on the left of Indian Creek. That was the worst thing we could possibly do. So if you want to start catching fish, start forgetting what you've done in the past. So get on your map, get on this Navionics viewer here on the internet, and start looking at these maps, and just break down the creek in sections. So like Jason's saying, take this one section of the creek, and this is probably, for right now, probably the best section of Station Camp. And so if we were going to go out right now, Jason and I were going to go out this coming week and fish Station Camp for bass, what we would probably focus on is absolutely this bank and all the way down that bank, because that's the creek channel. That's the deepest part of this creek. We probably would focus on this creek, or this creek drop. We'd probably focus on this hole right here. This is one of the better points on this entire lake. So we'd focus on that hole and this drop coming off. We'd focus right here. And what you need to remember about what I'm showing you is all of this has something in common. It's all next to this creek channel. They love this creek channel because of the drop. They can just go up and down depending on water temperature. If they were right here, if they wanted to say this weather this week, if they were up here last week, and now the water temp on Old Hickory literally is 39 degrees, and last weekend it was 48, they would have had to travel this entire flat to get back to safety. They do not want to be where super cold water. They would have had to travel that entire way all the way here. Whereas if he or the bass were just living right there, all he had to do was drop off and drop back up. That's where these fish are located right now. So you got to remember, they're here now. They're just going to follow this back to where they want to go. Some are just going to start spawning right in here. Some of these fish are just going to pull around and start spawning on this grass flat. So that's what you're looking for right now. Look for these topo lines that are very, very close together. Same thing as a bluff, same thing as a sharp drop.
Hey, Mike, can I chime in here just a minute? We got a question from Jack. He was asking, would this be the same for Watts Bar? And I think this is back when you were talking about Del Hollow. How does that compare to Watts Bar?
This lake and Watts Bar, same lake. Watts Bar, of course, is a little bigger, but it sets up the same. You're looking for these creek channels on Watts Bar. Chickamauga, the same. Gunnersville, the same. Chickamauga, Watts Bar, Gunnersville, all set up like Old Hickory, especially now that Old Hickory's getting grass back in. What you're looking for on Watts Bar and those other two lakes, you're looking for this dead grass, right, Jason?
Yeah, I mean, that's what you want, is especially when you go with the spot. And just to dive a little bit deeper what you're talking about so people understand what that means. When Mike says they set up, again, these are all lakes that were formed by a dam and there was a river flowing through it. What the river flowing through it is current. And current changes a lake completely. They work and look and act completely different from a lake that has current mainly through it, such as Old Hickory, Kentucky Lake, Barkley, opposed to a Center Hill or a Dale Hollow. And the current plays a role because the current will absolutely depend where those fish position themselves at. Current changes everything. So matter of imagine if you're walking outside and there's no wind blowing. All right, or next time you walk outside and there's an absolute hurricane and it's blowing 50 miles an hour, you're going to react and think differently in those scenarios. And I know that's a horrible analogy, but that's as close as we can in our minds get, because you've got current, which forces these fish to turn around and have to deal with the current. Morgan just asked about Nickajack. Nickajack is a prime example of current because it is a much smaller confined body of water, and that current even more so plays a massive role in positioning where those fish are going to be. So anything that has a river and current flowing through it, they're going to set up primarily the same. To Mike's point about the grass, yeah, they're going to, again, grass provides them additional cover for protection for the eggs that they're going to drop. They don't want them just laying wide open for bait fish, bluegill, shell crackers, for small lizards. That's why lizard in the spring is great. We all know that. And little salamanders and all that. So the mother is always thinking about, how do I put my spawn or my eggs in the most protected place possible? And they want that hard bottom. Old Hickory, for example, is tough because it's a silt bottom lake. Everything along the Cumberland River is a silt bottom lake. So they're always looking for, to Mike's point, grass, because it has a thicker stalk and it's a more solid area. Grass typically is going to grow on a hard bottom. It's not going to grow in a soft, murky bottom as much. highland reservoirs. They're going to be looking for areas, of course, with the smaller rock that are protected. So you got to just think of what a mother would do if this is your mom or your wife with your children. They're going to be birthing them. What would they do? They're going to try to protect that and put them in the most protected area they possibly can.
Hey, Mike.
Right. So
yeah,
if you're doing map study, go ahead.
There's a few more questions coming in on the Q&A if we want to take some of those, or however you want to handle it.
Yeah.
All right, let's stop. Let's go. Can we go back up? Jessica had one, then she had another one. With a lake like Center Hill, with mostly all the same structure being rock, where do pre-spawn bass first pull up?
Yeah, I kind of answered that before, but what you're looking for on Center Hill, they're going to be on, if you're looking at this map, on Center Hill, they're going to be on places where the topo lines are very, very close together, just like this bank on Old Hickory or a 45-degree bank on Center Hill. Something, that it can be a large flat, like out in front of Hurricane, but they're going to be on the drop of that flat right now. But what you're looking for is a flat, or where the bluff wall turns into a 45 bank, turns into chunk rock, into pea gravel. So you're looking for those transition zones from a bluff to 45. So check there first. That's where they'll be early, when the water temp, say, gets, 50, 51 degrees. Start looking where it transitions from bluff to chunk rock. And then 52, start looking where it transitions from chunk rock to pea gravel. And then from that pea gravel, you're just looking for the flattest part of that pea gravel. That's where you're wanting to find those fish. Like midway back across from the boat dock there in Holmes Creek, there's a large pea gravel. There's a couple of large pea gravel banks. That pea gravel is what you're looking for. So Dell Hollow, Center Hill, all the highland reservoirs up in East Tennessee, you're looking for pea gravel. And for the transition from winter to spawn, you're looking for that bluff to chunk rock to pea gravel. And it, you can just imagine it, just the bank tilting like that. And the warmer it gets, the flatter the bank you need to be looking for is.
What about same person had another question? What about on the river system, like the Upper Caney Fork River, without a creek channel? How would you find the pre-spawn and the spawning bass?
Those channels. Go ahead, Jason.
No, go ahead.
Well, I grew up down there. I spent most of my growing up in Rock Island, so I fished the Collins, the Caney. Grew up in Rock Island, did a lot of stuff in Rock Island when I was growing up. I'm from McMinnville, so I know that area very well. Those fish, if you're on the river above the dam, you're just looking for any backwater you can find. So those fish are going to try and get out of the current, especially on that river. It's got a lot of current on it. So any backwater, any cuts that get out of the current, that's what you're wanting to find. This is a larger example on the screen of what you're looking at on the Collins, whatever, but you're just trying to get out of the current. So look for the cuts off of the channel. If you can't find anything like that, get up in this stuff, and they'll spawn in this very, very shallow water, these creeks. Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, no, I think you hit the nail on the head. It's just going to be in those scenarios, it's all current related. And so find anywhere you can that gets you out of the current, find a backwater. If you can't, try to find as much of an eddy as you possibly can. Anything that again, a mother wants a newborn baby. Where is she going to want that newborn baby at? And it's going to be in that most protected area that they possibly can. I'm going to hop real quick and take, we had another attendee ask some questions about, bass can swim for a mile. Why wouldn't they swim to the back of the creek with warmer water warming up faster in the back of the creeks? And everything you said is absolutely right. Can bass swim from the front of the creek or from a river ledge to the back? Absolutely they can. But they don't typically do that at one specific time. They're going to slowly wake their way back using the highways, kind of the channel we talked about. Secondary points are always going to be something that you want to hit. A lot of times they will gang up on those secondary points. So yes, will they move? Yes. Will they swim back toward the back of the creek? Yeah, absolutely. But the one thing to always remember is a bass is going to move as little as he possibly can to stay comfortable, to stay oxygenated, and eat. The only time that really ever changes is the spawn, much like deer hunting. Bucks are really smart, really cagey until it's the rut time, and then they're just morons, and that's what we love because we can get them and kill them. Well, a bass is really no different in that they really break their pattern of what they normally do when it comes to time for the spawn. And so, yes, they will swim to the back and they will work their way back, but not everyone goes to the back of the creeks to the super shallow water. And when they do make those transitions, they're hitting those transition points. So real quick, at some point you talk about the movement of fish in tailwater settings such as below Chick and Nick. Mike, you want to take that one? I can take that one.
You go ahead.
So I've fished the tailwaters. I don't think I've actually fished the tailwaters of Nickajack or Chick, but tailwaters of Pickwick and on Wilson and some different ones are really notorious for being great times to fish. Yes. Do they like the tailwaters? Yes. But typically, if they're going to be in those areas, that is all driven from a need to eat, a need to feed. So when you think about a bass, there's going to, the two options that motivates them is they need to eat or something makes them react out of pure instinct to eat. So in those scenarios, will you catch fish there? Can you catch them this time of year? Yes, but typically those spots are the best when it's hot. You got super oxygenated water coming through the dam and those turbines. And again, that creates that boiling, that turnover effect, which basically the bait fish get disoriented. The bass can sit up behind a lot of different current breaks and absolutely gorge. And it's a ton of fun to fish, but not necessarily the best time, what we're doing right now. Can you catch fish there right now? Yes, but it's not the optimal time. The next question, headed to Chick, March, better to fish north or south of Highway 60 bridge. Mike, you can say, I don't know Chick that well. That lake kicks me in the face every time I go there. So maybe you can take that one.
We could ask the Pudlos they're on. Joe did well there last year.
Yeah, he did. Out of my boat, he did very well.
Yeah. It's you can really either way you want to go. Dayton is, up around Dayton is probably hard to beat, but then again you got Harrison Bay down at the end. So I love both ends. I would say Dayton's hard to beat. You got the Hiawassee up there. You can go up in the river. You've got Dayton, and it's full of absolutely large fish. It's just hard to beat Dayton. But then again, we've fished out of Harrison Bay for a long time, and Harrison Bay, you can stay in there and fish all day and do well.
Yeah, it's a fun lake. I'll tell you, it's kind of the crown jewel right now in Tennessee. Obviously, got state record, and it's got a lot of people from all across the country and out of the country coming to fish it. But that said, it can be a tough lake, and I speak from purely experience. That place can break your heart. So if you're going there, just know it can be really good, or you can not catch a fish all day. So don't get disheartened. If you do catch one, you got a chance to catch. The best chance is there to catch a double-digit fish, I would say, anywhere in the state of Tennessee right now. So, Mikey, we'll take a couple more questions, and we can finish out this queue, and then we can kind of move in, and we can talk a little bit about some baits. I've got, so you can't see it, I got a plethora here on my desk that we can kind of walk through and help try to put the puzzle together. The question, how you want to take that one about the late winter rains?
Yeah, I'll take that. The question is, how do the late winter and early spring rains tend to raise the water level and significantly affect the main river? How does it affect the transition of the fish moving back to the creek? It affects them a couple of different ways. If you're on Dell Hollow and Center Hill, if it muddies up the back of the creek, you can pretty much, what I would do if I were on that lake, I would make a beeline for the back end of that creek. Because here's what the runoff has done. It's brought new food into the system. The water coming off normally is warmer. So those fish are just going to follow whatever is taking them back into the back of the creek. It's not the bass. It's the food that they're after. The food has gone to the back of the creek. The shad are eating whatever flows in. The shad like to be where it's warmer, and the bass are just going to follow them. So those early spring rains, what they do is they move up the transition time for these fish to make it all the way back. So some of your better days that I've found on any lake is when you're fishing the back ends of creeks with these rains that have just muddied up the back end of the creek. So now your bait selection is going to change because, the fish, if you're on Center Hill, the clarity went from 20 feet to 3, but they're going to be in the back ends of those creeks. They're not all going to be there, but there's going to be a large congregation of fish in the back end of those creeks. So if you see that, get to the back end. That's where I would go. Where would I start my search for pre-spawn bass? Right now, there is nothing more that would help you than studying your maps and time on the water. So right now, get out there and start on the bluffs. If you don't find them on the bluffs, move to the main points of the creeks. So if you're on Center Hill, start on the bluff outside of Indian Creek, the bluffs outside of Holmes Creek, the deep drops at the Narrows. If you're on Dale Hollow, check the drops outside of those big flats. Check those bluffs. And if they're not in any of those places, start working your way to the main points. If they're not on those main points, that means the water is warmed up and you need to go ahead and start working your way back or get up on top of the flat and working your way up. If you're on Old Hickory, the same difference or the same deal is happening. This is Old Hickory Lake. If I went out today, I would start off on this bluff, throwing a jerkbait or something like that, or a Alabama rig. As the water warmed up, I would make my way to this transition and start looking for them on this highway, like Jason said. And then as the water finally warmed up, they're going to spawn on these banks that are just full of grass. So that's what you're looking for. You're looking for deep water to shallow water. And if you're going to start your search, you start deep first right now, and then go shallow. Whereas if it were in the spring, you would start your search shallow and then go deep, because they're shallow at that point. So if you're in April, you start shallow and work deep. Right now, you start deep and work shallow.
We lose Mike. I think you froze. We'll go ahead and I'll take this last question. So what would the minimum depth of a creek for it to be considered suitable for bass to winter instead of traveling to a main channel? Depth is all relative. So if you're in a creek that is typically a foot deep and you find there's a hole that's just been washed out that's 4 foot deep, 4 foot deep is considered deep. And so again, everything is going to be relative, where the average depth of Old Hickory, I think in the main channel is like 35, 40 feet, I'm guessing, but somewhere in that range. With the average depth of Dale Hollow in the channel is, I don't know, 90, 100, I don't know, somewhere in that range. And so again, that's all going to be relative, but typically, Sean, what you got to remember is not every single bass is going to adhere to these specific rules. So my personal opinion is I'm going to start off with the highest probability, meaning that main channel that Mike has talked about, the channel swings, the bluffs in those areas. And then from there, I'm going to go to and check the creek channels and check that highway. Could you start in the highway and bass be there? Yeah, absolutely. They could absolutely be there. But again, most of us on here don't do it for a living. And we're weekend anglers. And so we're going to try to maximize every second that we can on the water. And so playing the odds or playing the favorite or going with the best opportunity, that is what I would do. And if I've got some extra time, then you can spin it on the graph and be looking for those little pockets of fish in the creeks. But I personally would start and work my way from the main river, the main channel, and then work my way back into the creeks. Mike, you want to talk a bit about some bait selection? Is that kind of where we're at? You got some other stuff you want to add before we move on to that?
Yeah, I think so. Nope, that's what I want to do. Let me see if I can stop this. There we go. Maybe my internet pick up because I stopped sharing the screen there. All right, so right now what you're wanting to do is find lures that best find these bass where they are right now. Where they are right now is in these deep holes. So what you're looking for is baits that actually get down to them. So you're not going to throw a buzz bait or a topwater bait or a 3/8 ounce spinner bait or anything like that. You're trying to get down to them. So a couple of the better baits to throw right now. Shad Wraps, both sizes. Okay, this is a little large. What is this, number 5, number 6, number 5? And then you got the small one. The small one is very difficult to throw. You can really only throw it on spin cast, but it's probably the better of the two, unfortunately, because it's a terrible bait. There you go.
There's another version of it.
Try and get red, and you're going to throw that on the chunk rock, Jessica. That's what you're looking for. That chunk rock on Dale Hollow, Center Hill, Old Hickory. You catch them on Old Hickory like that. Right now, especially on Old Hickory and Gunnersville and Chickamauga, rattle trap in red. Gunnersville, this is a there you go. You and I got the same baits out, didn't we?
Nah, we did.
Gunnersville, this is a legendary bait right now. You get anywhere there's grass, and Gunnersville will set up the same way as Watts Bar and Chickamauga and Old Hickory and Barkley and Kentucky Lake. They all set up the same way. You can yo-yo these rattle traps through that grass, and when it gets stuck, you rip it away, and that's when they eat it. So excellent bait right now.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
And just to add on to that real quick, here's another option when you're looking at Nickajack, if you go to Gunnersville, anywhere that's got grass, this is a Z-Man Jackhammer Chatterbait. So it's called a bladed jig. It's got this blade in the front, and your line ties right here to this, it's kind of hard to see, but this line tie right here. So this is what the bait looks like coming through the water. It's got this head that wobbles back and forth, bangs against it, and it has a really great shaking, shimmy action, something real unique. It's a great bait to throw on top of the grass, just like Mike was talking about with the lipless crankbait. Bring this through, it kind of gets snagged, you snap it loose, and that quick pop, kind of like I said earlier, they're going to eat because they're hungry, or they're going to eat because their instincts kick in. Well, that coming through, hung up, jerk, snaps loose right in their face, instincts kick in, and they just reach out and bite it. And I'm telling y'all, that bite is absolutely insane. They are completely mad at it, and they hammer it. So that's a really great way bait to fish this time of year. Of course, red. I also like to throw a shad imitator. This one actually has a shiny blade compared to the black blade, but those are two really good baits. Another one that I'll bring up, it's by Rapala. Much like the Shad Wrap, this is the DT series. This is the DT. Looky there. This is
I
the
got
DT
the right color though. Well,
you do. I actually on Center Hill and Del Hollow, I like this bleeding olive color.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you know, I'll have that color tied on, or I don't have it with the Demon, of course. Demon color, that red is really popular. But DT stands for Dives 2. Just so in case you're wondering, DT6, this is what this is, dives to 6 foot. They got DT4, DT10s, 14, 16, 20s. But really the DT6 and the one that Mike has, I believe, in his left hand is the DT10. Those two are really, those are prime. They got a really great wobble. And again, winter time of year, everything's cold. You want a tight wobble. Another great one is anything that has a flat side. So I'll try to give you a good version of what it looks like here. It's a flat-sided crankbait, where if you look at this, this one has more of a round side. This one for sure is kind of a round crankbait. This one here is actually has a flat side. Actually, that's a pretty good comparison right there. There you go. Hey, look, you got the same one too. But flat-sided crankbaits, they've got a real tight wobble. All that means is it comes through, instead of doing this real big back shake all the way across, all it's doing is just kind of rolling. It's really, really tight. It matches kind of what's going on with the bait fish and everything else in the system when it's really cold. Now, the other opposite of that is the extreme opposite of that version, which is these two baits. This one over here is a wigglewort, and this one over here is a rock crawler by Spro. These are actually really big, wide, wobbling baits. And you're like, well, you just told me I wanted a flat side because it was a tighter wobble. Yes. Complete opposite end of it is this really wide wobble, really big wiggle, and it's the opposite end of the spectrum. Why it works, I don't know. I would love to tell you I have some great scientific reason why a big wide wobble or a tight wobble, but everything in the middle doesn't work very well in the winter. Mike, maybe he has a PhD and tell you why bass do what they do. I don't know for sure. I just know that. Oh, well, there. Maybe he will enlighten us.
Let me tell you why I think it works. Here's the deal on that. There are some baits that shine at certain times in the spring. That chatterbait, on certain reservoirs like Gunnersville, that works because it's making a commotion pulling through the grass, and it's a lot easier to get that through the grass than it is a crankbait. If you're throwing a chatterbait on Center Hill or Del Hollow or Old Hickory or Watts Bar or anything like that, I think that bait, just like this bait right here, I think those shine. This wigglewort, these shine when the water's muddy, and it has thrown those fish into a loop because they've not been used to that all winter. Our reservoirs in the winter clear up a lot. So when they get into the spring and they muddy up, that's when your chatterbait shines because they can find it. When this wigglewort shines because they can find it. That's when I brought out one of my huge spinner baits with about as big of a Colorado blade or Indiana blade that you can find. because this is how the fish can find that lure. So when your water muddies up, start looking for something that gets a little bit wider wobble that you can fish a little slower, because they're used to seeing everything all winter. And so I think that's where you get your difference. You know, this wiggle wart and this rattle, or this Shad Wrap, are two totally different baits. This is a sight bait. This is a field bait. And I think the muddy, the clear water plays a role in that. So that's my PhD version right there, Jason.
Hey, I like it. I mean, it's better than what I had, which was, I don't know, it just works.
Other baits that work right now when you're trying to find them off of these holes and then into the transition, jig, just a regular football head jig, a drop shot. If you know what a drop shot is, it's just a little bitty weight. You have one, Jason? It's just a little bitty weight. You're tying your actual lure about, I don't know, 12 inches, 18 inches above your little weight. So that's a real finesse type of presentation, but when it gets tough, that will catch it.
Mike, can I add a couple to that real quick?
Yeah.
One, we didn't hit on it, but I think we all know jerkbait, wintertime jerkbait. I mean, it's the standard is peanut butter and jelly, still jerkbait. We did talk a little bit before, but yeah, there it is. The umbrella rig, sometimes called the Alabama rig, spreader rig, a lot of different names, but umbrella rig, again, don't forget the state of Tennessee, only 3 hooks, guys. Now, this one here specifically has a couple, I call them hitchhikers, but they're little spring locks. If you can see that, you can put what I like to use is a missile shockwave. I put the 3.5 on the top, and I put the 4 1/4 on the bottom. But these are just dummy baits, no hooks. So again, make sure if you're going to throw the umbrella rig, which I recommend, it's a lot of fun, catch a lot of fish, but make sure you know the rules in the state of Tennessee, which is 3 hooks, and that's it. We talked a little bit about the drop shot, which is absolutely a great bait, but we're going to talk a little bit about finesse, a couple things. This is the missile bait. This is a Ned Head, called the Ned rig. Guys, all that it really is a scaled down miniature version of a shaky head. It's just let me pop it out of the package. It's just a jig head, lead weight, with a smaller hook, and a keeper. And all that we were doing in that scenario is just downsizing everything. You can see that here, but real small hook, small head. And then, again, I'm a big missile baits fan. Any soft plastic will work. Again, I like missile, but they actually have one called the Ned Bomb. It's a real small bait. I'll actually show you real quick. It's, as you can see, a really small worm, very little action. Great thing for in the winter. Also, what they have that I think they're the only one that I know that actually has it, maybe a couple other ones, but as Mike talked about the football head jig, this is their micro football head jig. This is actually a 1/4 ounce football head jig. So, hey, really great finesse way, but still have a skirt to catch some bigger fish. So, and that you just find your small soft plastics, anything that you would put really small. I don't think it's really a secret necessarily. I just don't think a lot of guys use it. That's myself and actually one of the guys on this call with us, Joe Pudlow Jr. We fished Dale Hollow back late fall. Bite was super tough, and in that transition time, and we caught him on a Carolina rig. But just a couple of little things to think about and remember on a Carolina rig in the winter. It's absolutely wonderful. But 2 things that you want to know is get a really long leader. Everybody's version of a long leader is different. My version is about anywhere between 4 to 6 foot leader, and downsize your worm. Right now, a straight worm about 4 inches or 3 to 4 inches, real small. Very little movement, no flapping appendages, no big kick or no big tails or any no like U-tail worms, but a Cinco or Missile makes a bait called the Quiver, which is much like the Ned Bomb, just a little bit bigger. Carolina rig, 4-inch bait, worm style, not a lot of action. Guys, it's freaking killer. Throw it on those long tapering points or those secondary points, and you will absolutely have a ball.
Keep in mind, there are a couple things, certain people love to throw certain things, and my certain things to throw right now, if I went out, I'm going to start off throwing an umbrella rig. I'm absolutely going to throw a jerkbait, and then I'll work from there. If I have to throw a jig, I'll throw a jig, maybe. But
I think we got a video of that, actually. Yeah. Maybe Jason can show up sometime.
Yeah. But what you want to remember is we talked about this last month, and it is absolutely true. There are different types of jerkbait. So if you didn't follow us, this jerkbait is different from this jerkbait. It's different from this jerkbait. You're looking at the bill. The bill, if it looks like that, if it's a Megabass 110, those short bills are for March. Okay. If the water gets up to 51, 52, 53, 54, that's when those baits shine. Okay. If you're below that, you're looking at a larger bill. Right now, you're absolutely going to throw a jerkbait like this or like this Stay 90. Okay. You're not throwing this one. Okay, so know which jerkbait you're looking for. Remember, we told you that where the bass should be. They're on the dark or the deep drops. You're not going to find them bass with this. This is a 10-foot bait. These fish are 30, 40 feet. And they'll come up and eat this stuff. They'll come up and eat this very rarely, but this is what you're looking for right now. So once you do get that transition from, 48, 49 degree water, once you reach 50, things have changed. Okay. It's about to get a lot better from where you're fishing now. It's pretty slow, unless you're on Dale Hollow or Center Hill, it can be a good time then. But when you hit 50 on all of our bodies of water, things are changing. You start throwing a shorter bill jerkbait. You throw it quicker. You start throwing spinner baits, willow leaf tandem 3/8 ounce spinner baits. If the water muddies up, throw a black Colorado leaf spinner bait. If it hits 54 degrees, start throwing your buzz baits, your buzz frogs, some of your better baits when the water gets a little dirtier. If it really dirties up, your huge Colorado leaf spinner bait. If it's 54 degrees, start pitching. You can start pitching your little creature baits on 3/8 ounce weight or a 1/2 ounce weight. Start pitching trees and pitching grass on Old Hickory or Watts Bar or Chickamauga. Places that you expect them to spawn. Start pitching this or pitching this around trees on Center Hill. Let me tell you about Center Hill and Dale Hollow. When you actually get to the right temp, if you're getting to 55 degrees on Center Hill and Dale Hollow, start flipping these trees, especially on Center Hill now. It's a different lake. It's up 20 feet from a year and a half, 2 years ago. The fish are inside the trees. So you've got to make a decision. And it's the same on both of those reservoirs. And I'm sure it's like that up on the Highland reservoirs in East Tennessee too. But you can throw braid, or you can throw really, really heavy fluoro, or really, really heavy mono. I'd shy away from mono, but those fish on Center Hill, they get inside of the trees when they're spawning. So that's where you're going to find them, and you're going to find them by flipping this with a 1/2 ounce weight right on top of it. And how you rig that, you rig it Texas style like you would rig any lure, but what you're wanting to do then is peg that sinker to the head of the creature bait. These are peggets, and you cannot effectively flip inside of those trees either on Center Hill, Dale Hollow, or even Kentucky Lake in May without these peggets. So try that out when they actually go to spawning. The first fish that are going to show up in these trees are going to be 1.5 pound fish, and you'll start seeing them. You'll start flipping in there, and all of a sudden your creature bait is gone immediately. Those are the buck bass. Those are the males. You know, they're not real big, but if you're catching them, you're in the right place. If you're on any reservoir and you start catching those bucks, you're in the right place. You're a little early, or maybe she is there and you need to pitch right back where you caught him. So, Jason, did you see the tournament down there on in Florida?
Yeah, St. John's.
Yeah. This weekend, the same thing going on in Florida. They're spawning right now. So Greg Hackney, early in the morning, he was catching bucks. He caught buck after buck after buck. He went back through in the afternoon, and instead of bucks, he was catching 5 pound female fish. So same place, just a little bit, I would say a little bit different water temp. It had warmed up and the females pulled up, and that's where they were. So, and I'm sure he was throwing something that looked exactly like that. So
he was actually throwing a Strike King, either the rodent or he was throwing that rage bug.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Same thing as these. What is this?
Pit moss.
This is the pit moss. Yeah.
Yeah.
Same thing.
That's my favorite bait, by the way.
Yeah. Same kind of deal. Same kind of thing as a baby brush hog from Zoom. You know, I mean, all of these baits will do the same kind of thing. You know, they're just something you can pitch around real easy, get around the trees, get them in and get them out very easy and not get hung up. So that's my transition of baits from deep to shallow. And if I'm pitching, that's about as shallow as you can get.
Mike, let's hit on a couple of things in regard to, we've talked lures a little bit. We've talked about where they're at, where they've been, where they're going, how they're getting there. Let's talk about kind of the business end. Let's talk a little bit about maybe reels, gear ratios, line, rods, just a little bit of those specifics as well, and really help bring that full package all the way together of where they're at and what you use to catch them.
Right.
And I can go ahead and start a little bit. You hit on it a second ago about braid, fluorocarbon, and mono. And we'll just, if you want, Mike, we can just kind of start talking about the deeper baits and work our way up to the shallower baits, kind of like what we had talked about.
Well, I think let's start off with just rules of thumb about the line. If you're throwing topwater, which is a great bait when you get up to 58, 59 degrees topwater, mono, always. Okay. Fluorocarbon sinks and it will kill the action of a topwater bait. Braid. If you're throwing around grass, use braid. If you're throwing in, really, it's just grass. Do you use it on Kentucky Lake anymore? I mean, to throw in bushes?
You know, here's the thing. It's, I've taken a different approach, and this is what I love about fishing is the fact that everybody kind of has a different way of doing it. In regards to top water, I've actually went to pretty much straight braid without a leader. I know. But flip side is to offset what I give up in no stretch, where on the mono side, I actually make up for it in the rod. So I'll use a medium to a medium light with a fast and extra fast tip. And guys, all that we're talking about is, and Mike's talking about with the mono gives you that stretch, right? So it gives you that movement. When a bass takes it, it gives it time to inhale it while you're setting the hook. Conversely, on the other end, I like Yo and Braid because I get a longer cast. I can use a thinner diameter, and I personally feel more comfortable with it. But to make up for what I lose in no stretch with the braid, I have to make up on the backside by using a really light, almost a noodle type action of a rod that gives me that stretch. And so it's two different ends of the spectrum. No one's right and no one's wrong. But that's
not true. That's not true. You're wrong. Rules of thumb: if you're on the bottom, fishing bottom, fluoro, right? If you're fishing moving baits, that, unless you're Jason, if you're fishing moving baits, rule of thumb, crankbaits type of things, mono, because you want that stretch. Unless you're Jason, he's got a system down, and he's got that system because he's been doing this for a long time and he knows what he's doing. So, but it just rules of thumb. If you're on the bottom and you want feel, fluorocarbon. If you're fishing a moving bait, these crankbaits or spinner baits or topwater, mono. If you're fishing in heavy grass or somewhere that you don't think you can get 25-pound fluoro out, then you're throwing braid. So those are the rules of thumb. Now, if I'm fishing a jerkbait, I've done it a couple of different ways. I've fished it on mono before, and this is one of the exceptions that I throw. I throw this on fluoro because this is a sight bait. The fish are absolutely coming up to it, and when you're throwing this is the way you've got to believe is going on under the water. The fish is absolutely coming right up behind your bait and sitting there looking at it before you twitch it again. And right now you're not moving this very fast, so he might be sitting there looking at your bait for 15, 20, 30 seconds before it moves again, and you don't want him to see anything other than the lure. So when I'm throwing this, I'm throwing fluoro. Fluoro is invisible when it goes underwater. It refracts the light. So they do not see the line on that. So other than that, if I'm throwing crankbaits like these or a rattle trap like that, I'm throwing it on mono. Jason might differ on that, but that's what I'm throwing it on. I'm throwing it on mono. If I'm throwing a jig, I'm throwing it on fluoro. It's a bottom bouncing bait. I want to know everything that's going on down there when it's going on. So what else, Jason? What do you
Yeah,
think?
no, I completely agree. Everything Mike said is 100% spot on. It's exactly what you should be doing. And then from there, the great thing about fishing is and the industry, there's a lot of different ways that you could do it. But more importantly is find what you're the most comfortable with. Take what Mike just said to heart. That's your foundation. And as you begin to fish more and get more comfortable, start seeing what works for you. In crankbaits, I'm much the same, except that instead of throwing a mono, I'm going to throw what's called a copolymer. It's basically a blend. It's a monofilament line with the fluorocarbon coating on the top. Only reason I do that, it just gives me a little bit more abrasion resistance. But again, these are just small little tweaks that make me feel more comfortable. I threw crankbaits on mono forever and think it works great. If one tip I will give you when it comes to braided line, and I had to learn this out the hard way, just because your braided line gives you a tensile strength of something really high, let's just say like 65-pound braid. It's great line, super tough, but braided line is not very abrasion resistant. So it doesn't have the coating on it. It's just not as tough. And so make sure you're watching your braid lines and cutting and retying if you're throwing around a lot of brush or rocks or anything that will fray your line. But everything you said is exactly right. And then from there, you give you the opportunity to tweak. Talking about umbrella rigs.
Don't throw it on braid.
Don't
stop throwing this on braid.
So Mike and I have had this ongoing argument or disagreements for years about throwing an umbrella rig on braid or throwing it on fluorocarbon or on mono. I said, Mike, you're wrong. You're an idiot. There's no way in the world. You got this whole chandelier going through the water. They're not going to care about seeing the line. And I think I'm right on that aspect. But where I was completely wrong is in the fact that Mike is right. You will catch more fish throwing throwing an umbrella rig on mono or on fluoro than you will on braid. It's a proven fact. I know because I was not a believer. Now I'm a believer. And I think it just has to do with the vibration that gets put off as you're reeling that braided line through the line guides, and you hear that squeak. I think that overall gets dispersed in the water, and it just turns fishes off. Can you catch it on braid? Some, yes. I promise you will catch more throwing it on fluorocarbon or on mono. So, Mike, I concede you were right.
I knew I was. Let's talk about bait progression. Okay, so in the winter, you're throwing these DT10s, then the 6. If you're throwing the DT10, the Shad Wrap is a good option as well. Once you start throwing this DT6, because you figured out that the fish have gotten a little shallower, you start throwing your rattle traps up shallow, yo-yoing them back or burning them back. Once you're starting to throw this DT6, you can start throwing your spinner baits. Okay, spinner baits. Your Alabama rigs are still working at that time. If you have been fishing your jerkbaits and you've been wearing them out, and all of a sudden, for some unknown reason, they stopped eating these, that's because they started eating these. Okay, if they've stopped eating this and you have no guess as to why, they've started eating this big Zara spook. Okay, so if you're catching them on this and it's just died, start throwing this Zara spook. So and if you're catching them on the spinner bait, there's no reason that they won't hit the buzz bait. Jason, you got anything on that?
No, I mean, I think you're right. I think it's you work through your progression, much like a quarterback. When he's running a play, he'll start with his main receiver, and if that's not there, he moves down through his progression all the way down to the man that's open. And fishing is no different. It's the same thing. The progression you're doing, following the fish back to ready for the spot, is the same exact progression you're doing with your bait. Guys, don't overcomplicate it. The fish has got a brain the size of your pinky fingernail. This is not an overly bright creature, but as fishermen, we have a tendency to overcomplicate. It can be very complicated, but keep it simple. The progression that you're doing going back into the creek, following that bass, is the same progression you'll do with your baits. And as that water temp comes up, that's what's going to give you the direction.
That's right. And so you're following these fish back, and it's going to depend where you are as to what bait you're throwing. If you're on those deep drops right now, you're throwing these DT10s. At 45 banks on Center Hill, you're throwing these DT10s. If you're on the bluffs at Center Hill, you're throwing these umbrella rigs, and if you're not finding them there, you need to start following them back when you follow them back, the shallower it gets, the more you're going to change what type of bait you're throwing, from this deep jerkbait to this shallow jerkbait. you know, and once you hit them, you start picking up fish, you found them, and you can start staying on top of them all spring. So they're going to move from these bluff walls or these deep drops to the main points. And from the main points, they'll stop on these secondary points. They're just stop signs. So they're just staging locations for these fish. So they'll stop first on the main points, and the second stop they're going to make are on these secondary points. And these secondary points, they're going to hang there until they're ready to hit the very, very back end of the pocket or the very top of that flat.
No, you're absolutely right. And what I'd like to do is we're getting close to winding it down. We've got Jessica's got a question that I think is I would love to hear Mike's answer, and I'll give my opinion in it as well. But Jessica's question is, why is it that red works so good this time of year when are crawfish really that color, or can they just see it better in the water quality in the spring? So I'll let Mike take that first. This is always a fun question that gets debated many times. So I'd love to hear Mike's perspective.
I don't know. I've heard, I'm absolutely sure we have somebody that from the agency that can answer this. I know we have crawfish people, but I've heard that the tips of their claws are absolutely red this time of year. I've heard that they're molting this time of year, which makes them red. I don't know if any of that's true. I just know that red works. That's why everything that I'm throwing, if it's a crankbait, I'm throwing red. I absolutely know it works. I've seen too many times that it. So I don't care why. I just do it.
Disclaimer: we're not biologists. We're just fishermen, right?
Yeah.
No, I am not.
Extremely apparent in this conversation. Because here's the thing. My answer, it literally is exactly like Mike's. I'm sure there's a scientific answer somewhere. And maybe that's something that we do bring up to the biologists at the agency, and maybe we can at least get a more scientific answer. All I know is, to Mike's point, by God, in the springtime, if you're not throwing red, you can still catch some fish. Don't get me wrong. You can throw a shad color or a silver blueback. I mean, you can still catch some fish, but you're going to get beat by the guy that's throwing the same bait, but in red. I wish I had a better answer, but just that time of year, they key into it. I do know that red and the color pink actually disappear. As you get deeper in the water, red disappears just from the overall light reflectancy. So if you're throwing a deeper red bait, maybe they're just getting more of a profile and not seeing the color. Don't know. But by God, I do know it works. And everything I got in the springtime is pretty much going to be red.
So she asked, would a red jerkbait work well also? I have never thrown a red jerkbait. I've never thrown one.
I've never seen a red jerkbait.
I actually throw, if I'm usually this time of year, I'm on highland reservoirs because it's a lot easier to catch fish. It's just easier. So if I'm on a highland reservoir, it's very, very clear, and I want about as clear of a jerkbait as I can find. You don't want, I mean, even now, something with a lot of flash, I don't throw on Del Hollow, Center Hill, or Kens Ford. I throw this, which is a clear blue type of jerkbait. It's Mega Bass. They call it Pro Blue. It's clear, and it's got just a hint of blue on the top of it. There is an exception to that rule, and I have, just like the red crankbaits, the exception to a clear jerkbait is this great color with chartreuse sides. Yeah,
I literally have the exact same one. How scary is that?
Yeah, I mean, Jason's got a Mega Bass 110+1, and this is an old Excalibur jerkbait. This is the shallower version of what Jason's holding. It's a little deader than that 110+1. It's got a deader action to it, a little cooler water. But this purple with chartreuse, there's something about it for smallmouth. come unglued on that bait. So that's the exception when you come to jerk baits. Otherwise, I'm looking for something very clear when I'm throwing a jerk bait, and that might have something to do with crawfish not swimming up in the water column. I'm not real sure, but I don't speak fish yet. Give me a year.
I'm learning slowly but surely. Guys, we're getting close to being out of time, so I just want to tell you, and I'm sure Mike will wrap it up. I'm just a guest on this show. This is his show, but I want to personally thank you guys for hopping on, sticking with us. I say have you guys looked at the numbers or not, but we only had a couple people drop off for an hour and a half seminar. That is an absolutely fantastic number. So thanks for staying with us. Hopefully you learned something. The great thing about fishing is it's a lot like golf. You never learn it all, and you just keep tinkering with it and practicing and getting better, and get out and enjoy the great state of Tennessee, the fishing that we have. I'll make a shameless plug. Make sure you are buying your fishing license and telling everybody that you know to get out and go fishing. So you can check me out on all the social media outlets, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, under Jason Holland Fishing. So appreciate you guys allowing me to be here. Don't forget the 3 most important things: faith, family, and fishing. Thank you, guys.
All right. I've got a couple of things. Number one, this time of year, and really all the time on the water, there's no, you can't make that up in any other way. Time on the water is where you're going to find the fish. And once you find the fish, if you stay on top of them all year, you're on top of them all year. That's why people that are in these bass tournaments, that's why you say, how in the world do they catch them every week? It's because they stay on top of them. So if you go out every weekend and you begin where you left off last weekend, they're going to be close to where they were. So that's one thing. Time on the water, there's no, that's the main thing. Just get out there and do it. Number two, this is a series we're doing with Jason. We're talking bass fishing. We're talking in-depth bass fishing. And we're going to do this each and every month. We have videos coming doing this stuff that we're talking about on the water. Of course, we're not out there right now because it's freezing, but we're going to get out there probably next week and get some videos of us actually throwing these baits, show you how we work them, because it's one thing to tell you what to throw. It's another thing to tell you how to throw it. So we're going to get out there and do that. And then finally, I want everybody to remember that here at the agency, everybody, our jobs are working for you. So everyone that has bought a license in the state of Tennessee, we're working for you. And the only people that are supporting the agency doing all of this fish work for you and making piers and biologists and all of that, and the deer and turkey, all the non-game species. You had a question about the crawfish. They work on crawfish at the agency too. All of that work is done with money that is paid on fishing license and from the sale of fishing equipment and hunting equipment. So the agency gets no just regular state tax dollars. And a lot of people think, well, it's a state agency, they just get money from the state. That's just not true. We are supported by hunters and fishermen, and that's who supports hunting and fishing in this state. And not only hunting and fishing, but all the other animals that people love to look at. So make sure and spread the word on that you guys are the ones that are protecting what you like to go out and do. So a lot of people don't know that, and I like to make sure and tell people that. So buying your hunting and fishing license is about as important as it can get, because I love to fish and I love to hunt, and I don't want to see that going anywhere anytime soon. So take somebody hunting and fishing, teach a young adult how to fish, and let them teach their children how to fish. So get out there and do this. Time on the water is so important, especially starting this new year. Once you get on top of them, you'll know where they are. So get out there and go fishing. Jason Harmon, you got anything?
Yes, I want to say I put a few things in the chat. Check them out. How to make an umbrella rig, bait caster basics with Jason Holland, and a Wildcast a few weeks ago. Outfit your boat for success. And just for Mike, I need to share my screen for a second. And I know you want to see this. You can catch a fish.
Largemouth.
You can catch a fish on a jig.
Maybe that's something. First cast, boys. That's something to notice.
Look at that big old stud right there, boys.
I mean, they're right here. They should eat, you know. A cute one.
What are you doing?
We are Dale Hollow Lake today. Throwing a 3/4 ounce football jig. Finesse style, got it pared down and really tight compact bait. Literally first cast, caught this pretty little guy. Let's catch some more.
So you can catch it on a jig if you have to.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining us. We'll do this again next month, and hopefully by next month we'll be close to the spawn, and we'll be sight fishing on Center Hill, Dale Hollow, and Kentucky Lake and things like that. So come back next month.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.